Thank you for tuning in to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Whether you're listening during your commute, while working out, or just relaxing at home, we appreciate you. Every download, every listen, and every subscription means a lot. Up next, the 12 Kyle podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am your boy 12 Kyle. Man, check this out. On this episode, what I want to talk about is pod influence, like the podcast community as a whole, and more specifically this podcast. At the time of this recording, many of you may not know this, but we are slowly but surely creeping up on my 10-year anniversary with this podcast, and then 2, my 700th episode. I said this before and I'll say it again. Like, I don't know that anybody sets out to podcast for 10 years or to have 700 episodes, but I'm slowly but surely getting closer and closer to that plateau. And I'm very thankful and very pleased. Again, it wasn't something that I set out to do. I was one of the few people who came to the podcast game in a different medium. My background was I had an internet radio show. It was called the 12 Radio Show that I did on Blog Talk Radio. And I did that for 5 years. It was a live show where you could call in every Wednesday night from 9 to 11. No commercial breaks. It was just me talking. If I didn't have on a guest, I talked for the entire 2 hours. And I took phone calls. And I did the 12 Radio Show for 5 straight years. Missed very few shows. And what happened was I got the idea because I started looking at my numbers and I was like, okay, well, wait a minute. The first couple of years of the podcast, everybody was listening to it live. And then maybe the last year and a half or so, I noticed that a lot of people were listening, but they were listening, throughout the week. And I talked with the homie Eclectic, shout out to E. And he was like, man, you should just make this a podcast. Just make it a podcast. And, that way you can record whenever you want to record. You're not bound to a specific day. And, you can, have the freedom to record whenever you want. And they have the freedom to listen wherever they want. And he was right. And so I started in 2015, the 12 Kyle podcast. And it's been a blessing ever since. But like when I think back, I had only heard of a couple of podcasts. I think probably my biggest influence as far as podcasts was the Combat Jack show. Shout out to Reggie Osei, the late great Combat Jack. I can't even remember how or why I started listening to Combat Jack, but I would love to hear his episodes. And the thing that I tried to do with this podcast that I really saw with Combat Jack was able to bring the listener into the room. So while he may have been recording with someone in the room, he made it look and sound and feel like that they were there. And so like each episode that I listened to, the more and more I listened to him, the more and more it sounded like, we were in the same room. And I would find myself from time to time listening to the Combat Jack show, and I would be in the car and Combat Jack would be talking and I would be basically talking back to him, even though I never got the pleasure of meeting Combat Jack before he passed away. As many of you know, Combat Jack, passed away a few years ago to cancer. And, but yeah, his podcast definitely influenced this podcast. If there were no Combat Jack show, I could promise you there would have never been a 12 Kyle podcast. Never. Even having the success and the show with the 12 Radio Show, the 12 Kyle podcast would have never been established. Because like I said, I wasn't really listening to a lot of podcasts, and to be quite honest, there weren't really a lot of podcasts out back then. There was one or two here or there, but it really wasn't a lot. And I think the only other podcast that I listened to on a consistent basis was the podcast Serial, which was, I mean, like it was more, that was more investigative, obviously about a crime story that happened. And I'm sure I don't have to explain what Serial is, but if you have not heard the Serial podcast, go back. I mean, like that podcast blew me away. And I was hanging on every single word on every single episode because it was real life consequences about a murder that happened and the circumstances around it and the ex-boyfriend and just everything that surrounded it. So that had me locked in. But other than that, like I said, it was Combat Jack. Of course, the homie Eclectic, he had his podcast back then. And so I would listen to his podcast. But other than that, it was just pretty much him and Combat Jack. And the thing that I wanted to take from the Combat Jack show was to make people feel like when they listened to the 12 Kyle podcast, that they were in the room with me or in the car with me or, going for a walk. And I think I've done a fairly decent job of doing that based on the responses that I get, based on the feedback that I get, based on, everything in between. Who are the podcasters that influenced you? Definitely Combat Jack. And I would say Combat Jack's probably my biggest influence. And then it would probably be, I'd probably say Questlove from the Questlove Supreme, who just at the time of this recording just ended his, I think, 10-year run at his podcast, Questlove Supreme. The thing that I love about Questlove is his ability to ask questions. And he, when he's talking, particularly when he's talking to other guests about music, first of all, his wealth of knowledge, like Questlove would have guests on that I'd never even heard of. And a couple of times I contemplated even listening to the episode, but he would always, if he was talking to, I don't know, the lead singer of the Black Crowes, I don't know that person. I don't even know if that's a group, but I would sit and listen to the podcast and he would weave in and out of conversations and you'd learn something about the artist, or you would learn something about, this particular actor or actress, whoever he was interviewing on his podcast. And I thought like that was really cool because the thing that's always interesting about being a podcaster is that you have to understand that not every episode that you do is going to bring in the masses as far as people listening. I understand that if I did a topic on dating and relationships or marriages or something like that, that's probably going to have more people listening because one, it's something that a lot of us can relate to, particularly as we get older, and also understanding my demographic. My demographic is people between the ages of 35 and 60. And so, I can, and most of my podcasts, people of that age can relate. Now, I'm not saying that the younger generation don't listen because I'll be honest, some of my son's friends, they listen to podcasts. Interestingly enough, my sons don't. I don't think my sons listen to the podcast. In fact, of my three sons, I think Cameron he's my middle son. He probably listens more than his older brother and his younger brother, but they do have friends that actually listen to the podcast. In fact, Cameron has two friends that have asked to come on the podcast. So, and I told him, I said, hey, we could do something. But yeah, I want to make it to where, one, it fits the audience. And I think the thing that Questlove does is he makes his podcast and the conversations very intriguing to people who may or may not know anything about the particular guest that he has. Now, if he's interviewing, like, I'll give you an example, like he interviewed Biz Markie. I mean, that was a dope interview. One, because Biz Markie, rest in peace, is a great storyteller. So Biz had great stories. But on the flip side, he knew what to ask and he wasn't asking like, I hate when I see artists or actors or people in entertainment or whatever on a podcast and they get asked these cookie cutter questions like, hey, well, where were you born? Where did you go? I mean, come on, man, ask some serious questions. It doesn't necessarily have to be serious, but ask some really good questions. Ask questions that you think the average fan would want to know. I mean, I could Google where you went to high school at. But yeah, Questlove is definitely an influence. My other influence, I would say, podcast wise, would be Bomani Jones from The Right Time with Bomani Jones. Bomani and I go way back. Now, when I say I go back with him, I'm not like his friend or his boy or anything like that. But he's been able to cultivate sports in a way and tell sports in a way that very few people can and be relatable. And he's not going to overload you with stats or anything like that. But he speaks in very common sense. And I think that's one of the things that I wanted to do in this podcast as well, is to speak in common sense to where, and I say this proudly, that my episodes of the 12 Kyle podcast and subsequently the Rap Soul podcast are like potato chips. You know, once you get one, you'll want another one. And so, like, I don't think that if you're really, really listening to this podcast, I don't think you can listen to one episode and just be like, oh yeah, he's all right. I'm not on that time. I think I know I'm a good podcaster. I know that I have two really, really dope podcasts that I stand by. And I'm not just saying that just because I'm a confident person. I'm being honest. I have two of the best podcasts out, And, you know, the thing that I tell people, and I mentioned it on the Rap Soul podcast, it's the best music podcast that you've never heard, you know, because it truly is. And I'm unbiased, in spite of what my homeboy King Germ says, who says I have a West Coast bias. Listen, I have an appreciation for all kind of music, but that's another story for another day. Shout out to King Germ from Pod and Saved Our Marriage. But yeah, I would say that those three, Combat Jack, Questlove, and Bomani Jones, are probably my biggest podcast influences. Like I said, Bomani makes sports very relatable, and he also touches a little bit on music as well, but he makes it very relatable. He's someone who is very, very smart, but he doesn't come off as a know-it-all. And I think that's very important as well, because when people find out that he has like 2 degrees or something like that, and, you know, his parents were professors and stuff, and he has a very high IQ, honestly, you don't see that a lot in sports. So some people probably tune in thinking like he's going to be one way, but he's another way. I'd like to meet him because, like I said, I've been rocking with him and his podcast. Oh man, way before podcasts were even a thing. I was rocking when he had the Morning Jones radio show back in the day. So yeah, I would say those three are probably my biggest podcast influence. Have I influenced any other podcasters? Honestly, that's not really a question I can answer. Are you feeling nostalgic for the golden eras of rap and soul music? If so, tune in to the Rap Soul podcast. We are your weekly journey through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, spotlighting the music and the hidden gems that shaped the soundtrack of our lives. From the powerful beats to the soulful melodies, we bring you the best of the past with fresh insights and stories. Rediscover the music that defined a generation. Subscribe to the Rap Soul podcast and enjoy the vibes. If you want a podcast where culture, conversation, and life collide, where you get insightful commentary, engaging discussions, and a fresh perspective on everything, then you need to listen to the 12 Kyle podcast. Hosted by the one and only, yours truly, 12 Kyle, a voice that you know and trust. This podcast will bring you thought-provoking moments, compelling stories, and a whole lot of fun. Whether you're a first-time listener or just tuning in, each episode promises to be something new and exciting. So sit back, relax, join 12 Kyle, myself, and my guests as we break down the world around us and give you stories that you've never heard before, from nostalgic throwbacks to everything in between. The 12 Kyle podcast is a front row seat to this conversation. Subscribe now and never miss an episode of the 12 Kyle podcast, where the vibe is always real and the discussion is always worth your time. I'd like to think that I have, but I don't necessarily know, because like it's not something that you think about. Like you really just want to put in the work, and that's all that I've done. When I look back on like the 12 radio show, there may have been some episodes that I did back then where I was shooting for a number or shooting for this many people to listen. So I would talk about a particular topic or whatever. I promised myself I wasn't going to do that with the 12 Kyle podcast and subsequently the Rap Soul podcast. Every episode that I do, it's the best work that I do. And I am simply giving you what I'm giving you, and I'm giving you my best. And as my homie Uncle Dolomite from the Too Much Game podcast always says, I'm giving you the game. And I really am giving you the game from my perspective. I like to, give people my opinion, because here's the thing. I really want this to be a medium to where if these mediums last forever and after I'm long gone, I want my great grandkids to be able to push a button and hear how their great grandfather sounded and what he thought about things. And that's one of the reasons why I don't talk about current topics, current events, because for me, if something happened, like I did talk about the Puff case or whatever, but I talked about it on the Rap Soul podcast, and it was more of an angle from how did Puff get here, not so much as giving you the updates or whatever like that, because I think once that stuff gets out of the news cycle headlines, it's not as entertaining to listen to. And quite honest, I don't really care. So I get a lot of celebrity gossip and stuff like that. And I mean, like, I can get that stuff anywhere. So, and I'm in group chats where people post stuff, and some of the stuff I look at, some of the stuff I just skim right past. But that stuff doesn't interest me. So it's really no need for me to talk about it. So I don't need to find out I don't want to talk about who Chris Brown is sleeping with. I don't care who got shot. I don't care about any of that stuff, because none of that stuff is appealing to me. I'm going to speak on every topic or whatever I want to talk about each and every time I sit down in front of this microphone. And that's what you've gotten. And that's what you'll continue to get for as long as I'm doing this podcast. So have I influenced? So I think I influenced the homie, Danny Foxworth. I think I've influenced him. And if Danny's the only podcaster that I've influenced, I feel great about that. Danny's a homie, man, and I've loved to see his growth, and we've hung out, and it's really always dope. And Danny talks about this on his podcast a lot. Meeting people from the internet in real life. And the thing that I always wanted to do was I always wanted to make sure that whatever you think of the representation that you get when you press play in 12 Kyle, that Kyle is the same person once you meet him. And I've been fortunate enough to meet some of the people who listen to this podcast. I've been even more fortunate enough to meet some of my fellow people who do podcasts as well that I consider to be friends. And I don't throw that word around a lot, but when you got a homie like Baylor, who the first time I met him, the man was like on one side of LA and he drove all the way downtown just to see me, give me a pound and chop it up with me for about 15 minutes before I went into the Laker game at the Staples Center. I mean, you don't get that. Cause trust me, I had Baylor come to Atlanta, like I'd gone to LA. I would have done that for him, but there are people that I went to college with, and some people I played football with at South Carolina State. I'm not driving all the way downtown just to go see you and dap you up and talk 15 minutes. No, I'm not. I'll send you a text. But that's what happens when you develop these friendships. So yeah, I think it's been like that. So I've been very fortunate enough, but I've always wanted to make sure that 12 Kyle and Kyle are the same person that you meet. Because trust me, when I turn this microphone off, I'm the same guy. I don't know how to be anybody else. I've been myself for 52 years at the time of this recording. And if God is willing, I'll be here another 52. And guess what? I'm still going to be doing the same things, still going to be kicking it, still going to be chilling, still going to be, taking a couple of dollars here and there and go buy the stuff that I like. That's what I do. Last question. Who is my competition? I talked about this on an episode before. I really don't see my friends who are also podcasters. I don't see them as competition. We're not in competition with each other. We're not in competition for topics. We're not in competition for women. We're not in competition for money. Everybody has their own niche, and I respect it and love it, really. If you follow me on social media, if you see me tweeting because I don't get on Twitter that much, but if you see me tweeting about listening to a particular episode, those are people I rock with. Those are literally like my friends. And so I'm going to broadcast and promote my friends' podcasts, especially when I'm listening, because that's the least that I can do. I want to be able to share with my social media about the people who I'm listening to. And here's the thing, you never know when you share somebody's episode who may see it, and then they may say, oh, well, let me click on this link. So they click on the link, and next thing you know, they're listening. I think that's very key. I'm very happy that they do the same for me, but I don't do it for that. But no, I don't think I'm in any competition with Baylor or Eclectic or King Germ, Pod and Saved Our Marriage. I don't think I'm in any competition with any of them. I think, Uncle Dolomite, I think we all have our own lane. And I think we do a really good job of running in our own lane. Now, I will say this much. While I don't think, Danny Foxworth's podcast or Britt Renee, I could talk about this all day, or J Boog, shout out to J Boog, whatever the name of her podcast is, whenever she comes back, Jay's Quick 3, I know what it is. But like all of my friends, I don't see them as competition. What I will say is this much though, I am inspired by them. There's not one person that I've named, and I hate to start naming people because you always forget somebody, but if I've tweeted your episodes out at any given time, there's been some level of, one, there's a great level of respect, and then two, there's been some level of inspiration. There's a lot of times where I will hear episodes and I'll be like, damn, I wish I'd have done that episode, or damn, I wish we'd recorded that together. And I mean, here lately, probably within the last year, you've heard me do like some remixes of some of the episodes. I remixed a couple of Baylor's episodes. I think I remixed a couple of Brit episodes. I know I did one from Eclectic, and I give them their credit because like sometimes, great podcasters come up with great ideas and dope stuff, and you'd be a fool not to share it. It's no different than, a dope rapper hearing his or her peer spit a dope verse or deliver a dope song, and you're like, damn, I got to go into the lab and do something just as dope. And, that's kind of like where I am. So when I hear great episodes, or I hear great things and gems from my friends, it just makes me want to go harder, even harder. Shout out to D Murph, man. Murph, I know he'll have his podcast back at some point. But I remember me and Murph was kicking in Houston. Murph said, man, what do you want to do with your podcast? And I told him straight up, man, all I want to do is make dope shit. I just want to make a dope episode each and every time that I do it. And that's what it's been for me. And so for me, there's not one episode that I can go back and say, oh, I don't want to listen to that. I can pick any of the 600 plus something episodes that I have. And from time to time, I'll go back and listen. I mean, I listen to all of the episodes, but I'll go back and listen to one. I'm like, okay, I see where I was going with this one. And, it's always interesting because like I can tell without looking at the date, I can kind of tell like where I was. Like I've told y'all on this podcast, like my voice has changed a little bit because after turning 50, I started having sinus issues. So now I sound a little bit more nasalier than I did before. And most people don't notice it. I notice it, but I've gotten used to it. I ain't gonna lie. It bothered me the first couple of times I had to do episodes and I didn't sound like what I normally sound. And it's something that, you just got to deal with. So I'm glad that my nose ain't running and I'm not stopped up. But you pivot and you move. And honestly, I don't know how long I'll podcast. I'll do it as long as I can, for as long as I feel like I got something to say. And the day that I stop feeling like that I have something to say, that'll be my last day. And it won't be a big hurrah. I'll just stop, and because I don't believe in all of that. I mean, that's cool for other people, but it won't be a retirement tour. It's just, just stop. And then after that, your body of work just speaks for itself. And I really feel like my body of work has spoken for itself. I'm thankful for those who have influenced me. I'm thankful for those who I've been able to call friends and hang out with and talk to on a day-to-day basis. Because I'll be honest, they're podcasters, and I'm not going to name any names because I'll start forgetting people. But they're podcasters that I talk to either via text or phone every other day, or group chat. And I talk to these people a lot more than some of the people that I went to college with, or the people definitely more than some of the people I went to high school with. And so they really become, friends. And in a lot of ways, they become like family. You get to know their kids, and they get to know your kids, and things of that nature, or your significant other, spouses, whole nine. So there's a couple of podcasters that I haven't met yet that I'm looking forward to meeting, kicking it with, and hanging out. I tell people all the time, hey, if you're in Atlanta, hit me up. If you hit me up, I'm popping out, no matter what, no matter where you, especially if we fly like that. Now, if we ain't fly like that, then no, I ain't popping out. But if we're cool like that, we're fly like that, I'm definitely trying to come see you and break bread with you, or hang out or whatever like that, or just chop it up with you for 15 minutes like Baylor did for me the first time I came out there. And, like what's interesting is like those relationships have cultivated so much to where like the next trip that I make to LA, I'm like, okay, I got to see Baylor, I got to see Dolomite. And you make those friendships a part of what it is as far as the people that you have to see, which I did when the last time I went to LA this past December. So, long story short, I don't feel like I have any competition. I feel like my friends are my friends and my podcast friends. I feel like they make great music and they make great podcast episodes, and I'm a fan. And I don't think I'm going out on a limb by saying that they're fans of mine. But like I told Murph that day, man, I still stand by that to this day. I just want to do dope shit, and I want to keep delivering dope shit, because each episode, while it's being consumed by a lot of people, every single episode is for me. It's named after me, and that's what it's going to be. And the day that I start making episodes for other people, that'll be close to the day that I quit. But up until then, you're going to keep getting dope shit. But I had to come on here and talk about some of my influences. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. Thanks again for checking out this edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. We drop new episodes every Thursday and every Sunday. If you'd like to contribute to the podcast financially, hit us up. Cash App, $TWELVEKYLE. Also, we have merch. Click the link in the description box. That way you can buy 12 Kyle podcast t-shirts, hoodies, as well as coffee mugs. We got it for the low. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. I am your boy 12 Kyle. I'll catch you guys next time. 5,000. Cheer.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of the 12 Kyle podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and share this podcast with a friend who needs the 12 Kyle podcast in their life. Every listen, every download, and every share helps us grow. Thanks for being a part of the 12 Kyle podcast community. We appreciate your support. We will catch you next time. 5,000.